This is quite frankly embarrassing for AMD in their latest tech-sponsored game. Like, this is game bundled with AMD stuff, and this is the second game with FSR Redstone. And how did I get here? I actually had this post pop up, which made me take a look at the Radeon subreddit, which I don't tend to frequent because in the past I found it to be a little bit of a pro-AMD cult echo chamber, but I was shocked what I saw here is that it's actually extremely negative about AMD right now. And this is me. I'm not logged in, so there's no like my algorithm happening here. And this is just sorted by best, which was the default. I haven't done anything. This is just if somebody who's not logged in goes to the Radeon subreddit, you can see people complaining that this is turning into a sub complaining about AMD all the time. We get WTF is AMD doing, talking about their probably having FSR Diamond be exclusive to RDNA 5, according to leaks. We have a bunch of people upset about stuff. We have a whole bunch of the RDNA 2 and 3 users still incredibly upset about FSR 4, at least the Int 8 version, not being available on their GPUs, despite the fact that we know it absolutely does work. And we also have people complaining about the lack of FSR support in compared to DLSS. And then again, we have the post that I'm actually found this on, which was right here, again, pretty near the top today when sorted for best. Now, this is about the second showing of Redstone. So for those of you unfamiliar, Redstone is actually a kind of a branding where AMD has placed their newer machine learning based features, including what used to be called FSR 4, but as I understand it, their current official branding is now just FSR Redstone ML upscaling. And then also this is where they put their ray regeneration, which is what this is actually talking about. Now, this is the second game. The first game I have already benchmarked, and there was two conclusions I made about it. The first conclusion is that it is noticeably better than the default denoiser in Call of Duty Black Ops 7, which can I just complain, and this post was complaining about it as well, that why would you release your machine learning based upscaler, sorry, not upscaler, but ray tracing denoiser in only the multiplayer PvP mode of a game? Like why was that the first place to test this out? People aren't generally using ray tracing in PvP multiplayer because you're chasing higher frame rates for competitive reasons. Anyway, the other thing I did was compare it against NVIDIA's ray reconstruction, and there were many scenes where it was clear that ray reconstruction was significantly better than what we were getting from ray regeneration. So there was kind of a mixed review here. It was ray regeneration is noticeably better than the default denoiser in whatever Call of Duty is choosing to use for that, but it's also noticeably behind what we're getting from NVIDIA's competing technology. And that brings us to this post, which is complaining about this video. Well, not complaining about the video. They're complaining about the quality of AMD's ray regeneration featured in this video, which is from Digital Foundry. I will link this video in my video description. We will talk about a few of the screenshots here, but I would highly encourage you to watch the whole thing. They have review access to Crimson Desert, which I do not. I did several days ago send an email to what I think is the correct email address for the developer, but haven't heard back. So I might have to wait until the game launches before I can purchase it and then start testing it out for myself. And I will say that a shot like this initially shows the same thing that I saw in our other game where we've been able to test it out, which is if you compare it against the default denoiser, from the engine. Now, this engine, it's not Unreal Engine 5. Oh, do they call it the Black Space engine or something like that? I could have the name wrong, but it's a custom engine from Pearl Abyss, the developer of Crimson Desert, to do their thing. And they rely heavily on ray tracing for a lot of the graphics in this game. Anyway, their standard denoiser is here, and AMD's ray regeneration clearly does a much better job at pulling in a lot of shadow detail. Like, it looks like an extremely impactful upgrade compared to the standard denoiser. And we shouldn't lose sight of that when reviewing it. However, when you put it up against the NVIDIA side, NVIDIA's ray reconstruction is clearly light years ahead. Now, if you're watching this on a smaller screen, let's look at some close-ups that make this a lot more apparent. So these are a couple more screenshots. Again, I encourage you to watch the full video. Here you can see a lot of pixelation in the ground tiles. Let's look at another shot. Let's see, this is another one. Here's a water screen where we can see the water is much more pixelated here and lacking as much individual detail in the reflections, whereas ray reconstruction looks like a generationally better technology. And despite them both trying to output a 4K image, this one looks like more like a 1080p image, and this looks more like a 4K image. It looks light years ahead by the resolution. Now, this is very zoomed in. Keep that in mind. And then we do have this screenshot as well, where once again, if you look at like the surface detail here, it's just worlds apart. And then if we look at the overall just pixelation of the image and the low-res nature of the image, it looks completely worlds apart in favor of NVIDIA's ray reconstruction. So first, let's address what is going on here. Why is AMD's tech so far behind? Well, the main reason is NVIDIA's ray reconstruction is actually doing something a little bit different than what AMD's ray regeneration is doing. As best as I can understand it, AMD's ray regeneration is just a denoiser for the ray tracing. It is not also upscaling it as part of the same algorithm. Whereas NVIDIA's ray reconstruction is doing both the denoising and the upscaling as part of the same algorithm, the same process. And whether or not that's the entire reason why it's better, my guess is it comes down to multiple things. They're just different algorithms, for one thing, running on different hardware with different machine learning capabilities. But it is very, very clear that NVIDIA's algorithm is far superior, and shots like this are showing that off, I think, much more clearly even than what we saw in the first game, where I was able to test it out, which was Call of Duty Black Ops 7. Again, still annoyed that was the game. But again, remember, in that game, it was much better than the standard denoiser, and we are still seeing that here as well. So AMD has done a good job of getting better denoiser than what we typically see from a game developer in their own engine. Yeah, this is not a good look here. Now, there's something that's also, I would say, worse, which is the fact that while it's looking worse, it's also running worse. So this is a momentary performance shot we have here, where we have AMD running FSR 4.0 performance mode. Using the, by the way, this is cinematic quality, so this is just a little bit of a side note. So I've seen a lot of people who saw this Digital Foundry video, which as far as I know is the only performance numbers we have really about this game right now on PC. Maybe I'm wrong and some other reviewers have access to. But they're pointing at this meaning, the developers lied about it running at 4K 60 native. Notice that this is at cinematic quality. The ultra quality is what they claimed. So it is very likely that the cinematic quality settings are not really designed to be optimal for actually running the game, especially not at native resolution. So I think it is far too soon to judge the game's optimization off of these performance numbers. And this was not the point of Digital Foundry's video either. So this is not really a performance analysis of the game. This is a performance analysis of the performance hit from ray reconstruction and ray regeneration. So 40 out of 52 is about 70, I want to say about 76%. Should I use a calculator? I am a math teacher, but 50 seconds. Yeah, it's about 77%. There we go. And then 52 out of 61, that is about 85%. So in other words, this is taking much less of a performance hit as well when we're looking at this side of things. Now, for any of you confused why there's a DLSS 4.5 here and a 4.0 with ray reconstruction here, NVIDIA's newer DLSS 4.5 model does not support ray reconstruction. Again, because I think it's trained, ray reconstruction is trained differently because it's doing both a denoise and upscale pass. So I think those are kind of different things, right? So that's my understanding of the situation on that side. But so what we're seeing here being complained about is essentially that AMD, first of all, only getting their second Redstone game out here, and despite it being in AMD official like partnered game where they're even having game bundles with this and all of that. So you would assume AMD has done their best to have this implemented as well as it possibly can be. It's looking significantly worse than the competing technology, and it's less performant than the competing technology, which also looks better. And that's not a great situation to be in. Now, again, this video is partially focusing on this because this is the post that kind of set me off here. But also, like I said, noticing just how negative it seems like AMD's subreddit has turned. Not that like subreddits are great, like, how should I put this, a representative sample of the total gaming population or even of Radeon users. But like I said, I hadn't been to this subreddit in a long time because I often found the few times I would click on something that was coming from here to have it feel like a very pro-AMD echo chamber. And wow, have things changed. So like I said, I think AMD really needs to look at this. So if anybody from AMD is watching this video, I have no idea. But if you are, I've got some thoughts. Number one, a lot of people are panicking right now that FSR Diamond is, which was announced alongside the next Xbox, Project Helix, which seems like it's at least on some level going to be a Windows PC, although the exact console versus PC nature of it is still a little bit open. But the point is that FSR Diamond was announced alongside that as a next generation upscaling feature, and the in-the-know leakers like Kepler L2 have stated that that's RDNA 5 exclusive. So that would rule out the people on, RDNA 4 here trying to just get some ray regeneration up and running, right? So the next gen that might do a better job might not even run on their hardware. And you might say, like, it's just some leaker. It's not even officially confirmed or anything like that. Why is anybody worrying about that? Well, why would they be worrying about that? Because AMD has already established a track record, which you can see right here. A bunch of people are complaining about on the Radeon subreddit about not supporting future technologies on very recent hardware. So FSR 4 has an Int 8 version that we know AMD themselves developed because they leaked it out. And it does run on RDNA 2 and RDNA 3. It runs a bit better on RDNA 3, and it works well enough. It works well enough that there are absolutely games where it would be preferable to take a bit of the performance penalty to get the increased image quality. So AMD, if you're listening to this, you absolutely need to release a Int 8 version driver override toggle for at least RDNA 3 and preferably also RDNA 2 users, where just like the RDNA 4 users can take a game with FSR 3.1 or higher and replace that with FSR 4 or higher through that driver override, then the RDNA 2 and 3 users should get that same option for the Int 8 version of FSR 4. Now, you don't need to call it FSR 4. It doesn't need to be branded the same. You could put a little warning that says that, there could be compatibility issues. This isn't thoroughly tested. You may take a performance hit. Throw up any warning that you want or feel necessary, but that needs to be there because you are losing the people who bought AMD in the past. A lot of people on these posts are saying how they are not planning on buying AMD next time they upgrade a GPU because they're feeling abandoned, and they feel and they're watching the RTX 20 series users get their what is it? I was going to say 6-year-old GPUs, but I think it's closer to 8-year-old GPUs getting access to DLSS 4.5. Even if it doesn't necessarily run super well on that hardware, NVIDIA is giving them the option to use the driver override if they are willing to take the performance hit to get the increased image quality and they want to do so. AMD, you absolutely can and should do that. I mean, I would argue you need to, or you're going to literally lose any of the users you already have. FSR support compared to DLSS support. I will honestly say I have been impressed with how many new games do ship with FSR 4 support. Still not as many as ship with DLSS support. And it's nice that a lot of games do have FSR 3.1, which can then be upgraded to FSR 4. That being said, there are a lot of games that have FSR 3 or older. AMD, I don't know if there's anything you can do to reach out to game developers and see if there's any way you can support them in upgrading their older FSR version up to at least FSR 3.1 so that FSR 4 can be used officially through the driver rather than people having to rely on third-party workarounds like Optiscaler to get FSR 4 into a bunch of titles. I do think you've done a good job at getting newer games supported, but older games need support too, and some sort of outreach needs to be happening. I don't know if that is happening behind the scenes, but it does matter. That game support list absolutely matters. And again, features like Redstone, this just isn't good enough. I'm going to be honest. This just isn't good enough. You need to do better. So do better. Whatever you need to do to make something that's more in line with what Ray Reconstruction is able to do, that needs to be done. And it also should not be an RDNA 5 exclusive if this is the kind of thing we're talking about with FSR Diamond. So find some way to offer some backwards compatibility for future generations because, quite frankly, AMD has less market share, they have less mind share, they have a smaller user base, and it's looking like they're, like I said, what used to be the most pro-AMD echo chamber that I had found really seems to be souring on it. So these are your theoretically most devoted fans, and yeah, this is where they're at. Okay, so anyway, hopefully you guys found the video useful and or interesting. Sorry, it's a bit of a rant here, but I really do think AMD does need to do better. Like I said, there's some positives here. Ray Regeneration is seeming to be a better denoiser than the default denoiser in games, but it is just not as good as Ray Reconstruction. It's less performant than Ray Reconstruction, and they have a bunch of other problems going on as well, and they are clearly losing their user base and need to do better. Hope you guys found the video useful and or interesting, and have an excellent day.